Chapter 13. The following morning, back at La Amethyst, Pilgrim came out from her bedroom, pulling up the zip on her hoodie. Her mood hadn't improved after last night. She couldn't believe that Hansford had turned her down flat. No one had ever turned her down. Seeing the apartment was Baxter-free, she asked Dashwood, "Where's Baxter?" Dashwood held an alertness in his eyes, which hinted at a man of hidden talents. Being a man of few words that always encapsulated the point at hand, he'd become quite cherished by both Baxter and herself. Standing at above average height, and now in his late 50s, he remained fit. He wore his hair cropped and styled short, with no facial hair. His defining features were his Roman nose and dark eyes, which suggested a Western Mediterranean ancestry. He was not only exemplary in his position, he was damned handy, as they'd discovered. He'd previously served as captain in Her Majesty's Royal Army Medical Corps, with 3 deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq as emergency medical technician. Mr. Mylar hand-picked all his staff. He'd recognised the fit and immediately seconded him to Pilgrim and Baxter. The decision had been greeted by both sighs of envy and relief through La Amethyst's staff quarters. Snippets of Dashwood's turbulent military action had been gleaned from his nightmares. It had been discovered why he'd been medically discharged after operating on himself to remove shrapnel. A psych evaluation from a prepubescent tick had recommended a desk job. Dashwood and his superiors knew he would never be able to sit at a desk. He'd heard rumours on the military grapevine about La Amethyst's staff and decided to find out for himself. He hadn't been disappointed, discovering many were decorated ex-military. "I believe Mr. Baxter can be found in the kitchens," he informed Pilgrim, anticipating the inevitable roll of her eyes. Moving past the hustle and bustle of staff going about their duties, she followed the clank and shouts coming from the hot and humid kitchens. Sure enough, she saw Baxter through the portal window of the swing door. Entering, she watched him bent over a copper saucepan while the sous-chef rattled away in French. The staff had become accustomed to her impromptu arrivals in search of him, but remained wary of her. The continued remodelling and redecorating of their apartment was legendary. No one spoke of it. The privacy of La Amethyst's clients was sacrosanct. With Pilgrim now standing behind Baxter, the various members of staff stood to attention, seeing the look of exasperation on her face. The sudden quiet meant Pilgrim was standing behind him. "I was on my way up," he turned, smiling. "I thought I'd just see what's come in today." Baxter was a gastronomic aficionado, and if he hadn't been a professional valet in his previous life, chances are he would have become a chef. One of his delights was to pop down to the kitchen to see what the suppliers had been able to lay their hands on that was off cart. Perhaps the first oysters of the season, a basket of wild fungi, or maybe even grouse. There was a never-ending stream of the fresh and fabulous that entered in crates, boxes and bags off trains, boats and planes that kept his culinary imagination whirring. The chef brigade recognised a fellow devotee when they saw one and regularly tipped him off when something special came through the back door. "We have a delivery," she stated. Turning on her heel, she headed out of the kitchens. "Be right there," he called after her, offering the sous-chef a full smile. "If there's any left and I'm back, I'd love to sample the finished product." "Sure," the sous-chef affirmed, knowing the likelihood of him returning in time after a call from Pilgrim was at best remote. Upon entering their apartment, he snatched his coat from Dashwood's outstretched arm and headed back out the door. Running down the stairs, he sprinted through the lobby and out into the bright sunlit morning to Pilgrim, who was waiting on the pavement. "Finally," she uttered. "I wasn't that long," he underlined. He knew she found his sudden disappearances to the kitchen irksome. He put it down to her not fully appreciating food and not having him to talk to. He understood, but she could become overly possessive at times. He rather liked the fact she missed him when he wasn't around. He'd never had someone miss him as opposed to missing his service. He inhaled deeply and then coughed. Despite catalytic converters, London's air still remained thick in places. Turning and dropping down into the cavernous void of the tube station, life through its perpetual artificial lens enveloped them. Skillfully traversing through the throngs, on and off noisy trains, they finally arrived at North London's Underground station, where the vault lay hidden. They moved to the back of one of the larger escalators, where the stainless steel door to the vault stood impenetrable, until he placed his hand on the front right side, and it whispered open. As they quickly moved inside, the door closed noiselessly behind them. The old cup and saucer lamps that hang from the ceiling shed as much light as they could muster. They walked along the stone-walled corridor, past various antechambers, as Pilgrim flicked on the switch that lit up the vast room and vaulted ceiling. Stretching out into the distance stood thousands of packages, wrapped in brown paper with their unique monkey-fist knot in twine. Many of them were huge in dimension, while some lay small and neat. Stepping over to a long, slim wooden crate, she lifted the lid, pulling it to the side. "One large Neolithic stone for cataloguing," she announced. Peering inside, she saw an aged and pock-ridden grey stone covered in withered lichen. "And someone thinks this is important." He lifted his eyes doubtfully to hers. He'd learned by experience an object's worth was not immediately apparent. "Our client seems to think so," she confirmed, plonking herself down on one of the crates nearby. "And who is the client?" he asked, lifting up the vault's ledger and running his finger down the alphabetized tabs. "Paleontology Earth Matters, PLC. You'll find another entry for them from last year." Opening the ledger at P, he scanned the list of clients, finally alighting upon their name. "Ah, yes, yet another priceless bit of rock," he uttered dryly. "What number do you want to give it?" Pilgrim had a remarkable faculty for memory. Despite the thousands of packages within the vaults, she could easily recall the number, client, and contents from all of their vaults. 117, she added quietly. 117 it is, he noted in the ledger. Placing the lid back on, he began hammering down the nails to secure it. "Help me lift it. I'll wrap it and then we'll move it over there with the other one." "You'll need the forklift." "It can't be that heavy, even if it is stone." His voice trailed off. He'd made an assumption, a rookie mistake. "So, what is it really?" he asked pensively. "For all intents and purposes, it's a duck." "A duck?" "It looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, so it must be a duck, right?" "Not in our world," he stated warily. "Is it solid?" "Perfectly. I've had it scanned. I've also had it tested. It's definitely a stone and falls into the Neolithic period." But its density can't be explained to my satisfaction." "That's a red flag if ever I heard one." As he had the final say-so for any items agreed for storage, he definitely now had reservations. "I've checked the provenance and spoken with the client. They've assured me that, yes, its weight is unusual, and that's why they want it stored. They've run their own tests and have come to the same conclusions as us. They can't explain it either, but they're obviously as intrigued as we are. Personally, I don't have a problem with it." Her last words hung in the air between them. Baxter was nervous, but his alarm bells weren't ringing especially hard. "The other one has never been a problem," she pointed out. "Okay, let's store it. However, if there are any developments, it's out the door." "Sounds reasonable." He put on some music as he set to work. She liked the fact he was happy, even if it was predictably short-lived. A while later, he turned off the forklift and jumped down. "What do you think about us holding a party at Merrilmar? Just a few close friends," he suggested. She looked at him closely. "We don't have any friends," she observed truthfully. She noted this was the first time he'd had made such a request, and it told her two things of importance. The first was that he was settling into his new life. The second was he wanted friends to socialize with, and she was no longer enough. On the one hand, she was happy for him, but on the other, she'd have to share him. It was entirely selfish on her part, but that's how she felt. Maybe she should start developing a circle of friends herself. At the thought of having new friends, as opposed to business acquaintances, she was initially buoyed. Then reality smacked its reminder across her face. The reason people with extraordinary abilities led a solitary life was that, inevitably, friends talked. Word would get out, and her life wouldn't be her own, or worse. Okay, scratch a mental line through friends. So what? She'd live vicariously through Baxter on the friends front. It'd be a start. "There's Brian and Frank," Baxter suggested, acutely aware he was struggling to put even 5 people together. "As we've never met Frank, I don't think he counts." "So, just Brian," he said bleakly. "You can't have a party with one guest." "No, I don't suppose so." "Let's cultivate some friends, promote some of those acquaintances." He rubbed his hands together enthusiastically. "They're acquaintances for a reason." She was not especially keen on the idea, as many of them were business-related and by definition unconventional. She could imagine them all standing around in one room, drink in hand, deeply suspicious of one another, without the slightest thing in common. No, their acquaintances weren't party material. Massively intellectually absorbing in their own right, but just not designed to socialize. "You're no fun. You're always picking holes in things." "Look, a party sounds like fun, but you'll have to organize it. As we don't have any friends per se, make sure you select carefully. If you're inviting them to Merrilmar, you'd better be sure about them." He affected an aloof countenance and enunciated, "Yes, ma'am." "Baxter, do we actually know any fun people?" He thought about it. "That'd be a no." He was suddenly downcast. What did that say about them? That they should damn well get out there more, that's what, he thought. Seeing the look of defeat on his face, she said brightly, "Plan A, recon places where fun people hang out. Plan B, procure friends that are fun. Plan C, throw enormous party." He looked at her doubtfully. She added, "Let me take you out to lunch. I've found this great restaurant." He eyed her warily before asking, "A great restaurant?" "Yes, a great restaurant." This isn't going to be like the last time when you said you'd found a restaurant with a unique a la carte menu, and it turned out to be roadkill. That wasn't so bad. At least the meat was completely tenderized, she teased. That's not funny, Baxter added seriously. I know you'll like this one, she urged. After they'd returned from lunch, Dashwood's greeting had stuck somewhere in his throat as he took in the pallid colour of Baxter's face. Soon after the flush of Baxter's toilet could be heard in the background, he'd returned to their living room and sat down carefully on one of the chairs, throwing Pilgrim a look of disdain. "What?" she gasped at him. "I'm shocked at my naive optimism. Granted, it looked innocent enough from the outside. The name should have made me turn and run. The American Depression," he added with derision. "If I never see another garbanzo bean, I'll be a happy man." "You should have stuck with the vegetable soup and crusty bread. It was really very good." He started to laugh as he put his head in his hands. Pilgrim seemed slightly put out by his opinion of her choice for eating. "I'll admit it was a little out of the ordinary, but I know you like to try new things." "New things, yes. Let's just say your choices are a trifle rustic for my tastes." "Suit yourself." Dashwood entered carrying a tray with an effervescent liquid. "Your settler, sir." Baxter took the glass and downed it in one, placing it carefully back on the tray. Dashwood paused, gaining their attention. "A vintage bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape was delivered today. Mr. Mylar couldn't shed any light on it." "Let's see it," Baxter stated seriously. Dashwood's second pause made them both look at him expectantly. "Who delivered it?" she asked, her eyes now concentrated on him. "A young room service stewardess. She was cleared by security, but not by Mr. Mylar. On reflection, she could have been wearing a wig and contacts. The contents of the bottle haven't been tampered with." "I see. Let's take a closer look at it," she instructed. "Certainly." Dashwood inclined his head, returning with the bottle on its salver, which he placed on the centre table. Baxter reached across and lifted the bottle from the table. Examining it carefully, he gave an affirmative and passed it to her. "Notice anything?" She scrutinized the bottle, finally placing it back on the salver. "The label's thickened," she stated carefully. "Dashwood, take this bottle down to Mr. Mylar and ask him to dispose of it." "Certainly." With Dashwood closing their suite door behind him, Baxter asked, "My guess is it's masking a listening device. Who feels that's necessary and would take such an obvious risk? It's too passé for the Titans. It could be anyone." "No, not just anyone. A young woman," she corrected. "Who is she?" "Could be just a courier." "No, this is personal and a little too homemade." Baxter stilled, allowing the faces of young girls in his memory bank to flash past his mind's eye. They'd been sat for several minutes in complete silence when he slowly suggested, "What about Phelps's daughter?" She looked at him, nodding in agreement. "It would make sense. You saved her. I can't think of anyone who'd be interested in learning more about either me or us using such a rudimentary device, so it has to be you." "The last I heard, they'd been collected by social services," Baxter stated. With a sharp intake of breath, she looked shocked. "There was someone else?" she asked in a measured tone. He frowned at this piece of news, which it dawned on him she might not have known, that Mr. Phelps had 2 children. "Yes, Monica, the sister, and her brother. Now what's his name? He frowned as a flood of horrific memories deluged his consciousness. His face had turned ashen. Baxter? She asked, suddenly worried by the effect the memory was having on him. She was screaming it. I pushed them behind me when Phelps went for them. Just the memories conjured up in Baxter's mind made him straighten his posture. It was grim, and something no child should have witnessed. Phelps was covered in their mother's blood. He was completely unhinged. I didn't have anything to defend us with. I used a chair to try and keep him back, but that got thrown to the side. He began to rhythmically rub his palms together. Slowly lifting his wrist, he gently rubbed over the defensive wounds from Phelps's vicious knife attack, where the faded scars remained. I don't know how we got out of there alive. She'd been watching him as the memories he kept buried percolated through him. I don't recall any mention of a boy in the paper I read. She wanted to keep him on track. Impossible. He was there. Her warning system had moved to high alert. She remained outwardly calm, not wishing to distract his train of thought. I want you to remember, was he trying to kill both the children? Yes. Phelps went crazy, rabid even. He was soaked in blood. His eyes were wild. He would have murdered them. Did he say anything? No, nothing. I can't remember him saying. He mumbled, immersing himself more deeply in the memory. He didn't say anything, but he was hell-bent on killing his son. But he stopped. He drew a deep breath. Maybe it was just the boy he was after. Pilgrim's mind was racing. If Monica is still alive, she posed. If she is, what's she been up to all these years? And is her brother still alive? More importantly, who is he really? She asked gravely. Now back at Par, Monica was sitting at her desk with her headset on as she listened in to the conversation between Baxter and a woman called Pilgrim. She'd been right to bug both the bottle and the salver, but now she was discovered. Her worst-case scenario was unfolding. She listened as the two of them quickly discovered her identity. Now she was forced to react, and reaction often included error. How could she lessen the danger she placed both herself and Rika in? Still, she thought, Rika's location would buy him a little time. No one would think of looking in a place of fable and illusion. The Cour des Miracles, the Court of Miracles.